All right. So today now we are discussing the verbal passages from your ANUBHAV test 1. All right. So just a moment. We'll get started with the questions shortly. What you want to remember when you're looking at the verbal questions is there'll be in this case we had 25 questions for verbal, but these 25 questions for verbal, this number can change. So we can expect maybe more or maybe less questions. All right, we'll look at the actual questions and we'll determine whether we understand or we'll determine the accuracy of these questions. Let's get started. So, all right, this is the first question that we'll discuss. So, the first thing, obviously, I'll also give you a few pointers about how to solve these questions ideally. We want to make sure that for these questions, we read what the question stem of the author is first. We need to read what is asked of us. So, we are asked to check for inferences, valid inferences. Let's go through the passage. I've already marked the passages and the options. A seed is a necessary component in the development of food, we are told. With the help of emerging technologies like genome editing, seeds may be improved. So, seed is necessary, seeds may be improved. We can make them better to produce better crops with fewer chemicals, less fertilizer, water. India will need to adopt such technology. So, the author is outright making a recommendation. India will need to adopt such technology which improves seeds, right? If it needs to feed or if it needs to have so much quantity of grain in the near future, it needs to adopt this technology. So, which of them is a valid inference? For inferences, always remember, we need something stated in the passage, a word or something stated, right? Let's take variable A must be stated for me to infer B. Remember the example for inferences, the traditional example that I had discussed before is dark clouds and water everywhere. Right? So, we take fact A and fact B and we put these two facts together and we infer that it has just rained. So, what I want you to remember is an inference is not directly stated. We need an associated fact and from that associated fact, we'll draw an inference. All right. Okay. So, let's look at the options. A, genetically modified foods alone will help India make strides towards nutrition and food security. Obviously, this is incorrect. B, the use of technology in the field of agricultural and genetically modified food can help India. So, it can help India in the near future. Ye to diya hai. But can help India transform its agroeconomy is invalid. There's no mention of it transforming the agroeconomy. Let's continue. So, transformation of this economy, transformation of agroeconomy, we can't state. Let's look at C. To meet future demand, India must emphasize the role of technology to enhance production of food grains with limited resources. We are clearly told here, these seeds may be improved. India will need to adopt such technology in the near future. So, C is the clear choice over all the other options presented. Let's look at the next one. All right. The next question. We are given a short passage and here we are asked for assumptions. Always, like I said, look for questions before. Alright, so we are looking at the second question, we are looking at assumptions. Now for assumption also, I'll just give you once an idea what an assumption is. An assumption has to be underlying the passage, right? We need to know for sure that the assumption must be true. Remember that this assumption, it must be true. This assumption must be true. Must be true if the passage has to be true. For example, so I'll explain it to you. Let's read the passage. In the earlier days of film photography, black and white camera film was particularly sensitive to blue light. So we are told earlier film was very sensitive to blue light, but not to red light. So because of this, what it was capturing, features like blue sky and all, it couldn't capture properly. So to change that, photographers would apply a red filter. ठीक है, मतलब sensitive to blue light था, not sensitive to red light. So to balance the two out, photographers are applying a red filter and making the sky sufficiently dark for the film to capture puffy clouds. So from this, an assumption can be made that photographers adding a red filter, right, This is somehow helping. This is helping create a better image. Right? This is clear. So the underlying assumption is that there is some connection between photographers applying a red filter and it helping them look at the blue sky in a better way. Correct? Let's look at the options. A, red filters were very popular in the old days of photography. We can't say red filters were very popular in the old days of photography. Same way, we can't say with option C, black and white photography used to be very popular. I can't, to suggest very popular or in a specific way popular, specific popularity, very popular, extremely popular, any of that specific popularity would be incorrect. So A is gone, C is gone. Let's look at D. Infrared rays are invisible to the naked eye. Infrared rays are invisible to the naked eye. This would be incorrect, of course, because this is not stated in the passage. So B is completely incorrect. Let's look at D. Red filters cut out some blue light on black and white film. See, option C has to be true. Option D, sorry, has to be true for the passage to exist. If red filters did not cut out, if I said cannot cut out, red filters cannot cut out some of the blue light, then the entire passage would have been incorrect. Right? So we can tell that this assumption, is absolutely necessary for the passage to exist. Right? This assumption being red filters cut out some of the blue light. If this assumption was removed, the passage would change. Remember this idea, D is the correct choice. An assumption is necessary, a valid assumption is necessary for the passage to exist in a valid way. Alright, D is the correct choice. Let's look at the next one. Okay. Now, passages so far fairly easy. The paragraph that best supports the statement, we'll go through the passage once. Desktop publishing DTP. This is basically we are told what that phrase means, what it is used to do. And then the author gives us a clear recommendation. Planning is the most crucial component of any DTP project. Prior to starting, you should have a clear understanding. So the author is telling us what DTP is, what is required of that process to make it efficient. So the paragraph best supports the statement. Which of these statements is best supported? Here A, desktop publishing is one way to become acquainted with new business venture. So there's no discussion of being acquainted with new business venture. A is invalid. B, computer software continually being refined to produce high quality printing. There's no discussion of computer software being continually refined. C, the first stage of any proposed DTP should be organization and design. So here, the first stage of any proposed DTP project, planning is the most crucial phase. And prior to starting, meaning initially, the first stage is coming from prior to starting, you should have a clear understanding. So first stage of any proposed DTP project should be organization and design. C is the clear choice. The planning stage of any DTP project should include talking with intended audience. You need to speak verbally, vocally speak with the intended audience. This is going to be incorrect. A lot of students have gone with D, but C is the correct choice. We can't specifically say speaking or talking or typing or interacting with audience. That specificity we can't, the passage does not support. So C is the clear choice. Let's look at question 4. What is the most logical corollary? So look at the most logical corollary as the most logical thing that is supported by the passage, like the previous question, right? So here the passage is talking about Supreme Court has ruled repeatedly that the state frequently bears greater burden in proving that it has behaved within the boundaries of the law. So the state must follow the rules or the rule of law. And later we are told the Supreme Court has affirmed the strict legal requirements that must be completed in order to deprive a person of their property. Matlab, property lene ke pehle there is some set of rules that we need to follow. That is what is spoken about. So let's look at the most logical corollary to the above passage. So let's look at option A, the dispossession, the taking of someone's private property following due process of law violates their human rights. We are told that if you follow the process of law, here, if you follow the rule of law, then you aren't violating anyone's rights, right? So, if you read this sentence which is marked in green, strict legal requirements that must be completed in order to deprive a person of their property. So, if you complete these legal requirements, it's not violation of right, then it's valid. So following due process of law makes A incorrect. This phrase makes A incorrect. By the way, those of you who are marking which phrase makes a particular option incorrect, I'm not asking about correct. Those of you who are marking which phrase makes a particular option incorrect, that's the best way to move towards accuracy in any exam, especially the CSAT exam that we are facing now. Let's look at B. No state will evade its legal responsibility towards those from whom their private property is expropriated. So no state will evade responsibility. ये तो नहीं कह सकते. In fact, these limitations on the state are put because states may, in fact, evade their legal responsibility. So B is incorrect. Let's look at C. C may we are told lack of legal authority for deprivation of property is a criminal offense. We can't know this from the passage. We are supposed to answer questions purely from the passage. Nowhere is it stated what kind of offense is it. Is it criminal? Is it not criminal? So C is invalid. Is it civil offense? Nothing like that is mentioned. D is the correct choice. Individuals are protected from arbitrary government action. In fact, this statement is the most logical similar statement with the one marked in green in the passage. Strict legal requirements that must be completed in order to deprive a person of their property. That is what option D is saying. Individuals are protected from arbitrary action because there is a legal framework, rule of law. Alright, D is the correct choice for question 4. Let's look at question 5. What is it implied by creative society? This passage had 2 questions. In the exam, this will appear as a passage with 2 questions. Right? So when you're solving a passage with 2 questions, always remember, there's no point reading the question stem first. You have to just go through the passage. Let's go through the passage once. The term creative society describes a stage in a society's growth during which a great deal of potential tensions become vocal and present. So creative society matlab great deal of potential tensions become vocal and present. Best example, we are given an example of it. So we know it's important to the author. Example is marginalized socio-economic groups become politically active and demand their rights. Okay. Then the rest of the passage is essentially talking about how marginalized socio-economic groups become politically active and demand their rights. Upsurge of peasants, upsurge women's movements, etc. The forms of social movements and their intensity may vary, but the very presence of these movements for social transformation indicates the emergence of creative society in a country. So last sentence is also talking about the same thing basically, but the only thing the last sentence is adding is social transformation is happening. That's actually evident here. Okay. So what does the author imply by creative society? We know the definition of creative society from the first 2 sentences, and that's enough for us to answer this question. 1, a society where diverse art forms and literary writings seek incentive. So 1 is obviously incorrect. There's no mention of diverse art forms. And 2, a society where social inequalities are accepted. This also is untrue. Potential tensions are discussed. So there's no acceptance of inequalities. 3, a society where people demand the right to shape and direct their destiny. This is the right choice of the author. We are told shape and direct their destiny because they become politically active, demand their rights, and the upsurge of the peasants' movements for regional autonomy and self-determination. Self-determination is the right to shape and direct your destiny. That is the meaning of self-determination. So 3 is valid. And 4, the groups growing conscious of their human rights and upliftment, this is directly stated. So 3 and 4 only. 4 sabhi ne select kiya hoga, 4 only many people will have gone with. But the actual answer choice is C, which is 3 and 4. The right to shape and direct their destiny is self-determination, which is discussed in the passage. We can answer this question from the first few sentences itself. The right choice is C. Let's look at question 6. What according to the passage are manifestations of social movements? Social movements ke examples have been given to us. Some examples are told to us. There are certain specific manifestations of these movements. So let's look at these. 1, aggressive and being incendiary. So incendiary is again aggressiveness only, or being explosive, or in some way being overall we can say negative for society. So this is not discussed in the passage. We are discussing social movements in a positive light in the passage. So 1 is invalid. Instigation by external forces. External forces not discussed in the passage. Right? Let's look at 3. Quest for social equality and individual freedom. This is correct. Social equality is discussed, and like I said, self-determination, individual freedom is discussed. 4, urge for granting privileges and self-respect to disparage sections of the society. We are discussing here movements for regional autonomy, environmental movements, women's movements. So peasants and tribal movements, initially also politically active, demand their rights. So all of this is talking about you urge for granting privileges and self-respect to disparate sections. Essentially, social equality ka dusra definition has been given in the next statement. 3 tells us social equality. Another definition of 3 is 4. Right? Correct choice is actually option C. Okay. Let's look at passage 6. And passage 6, we are back to inference questions. Inference का already मैंने definition आपको बताया है. We can't identify a particular option. We always have to eliminate our way to the right choice. We can't select, and to reach the final choice or the correct choice for an inference question, you need to have evidence in the passage and then eliminate options. Let's look at the passage. To increase effectiveness of financial intermediation process. आपको अगर if you want to increase the effectiveness of financial intermediation, India's banking system underwent change. So then to achieve this, India's banking system underwent change. So we are told what the objective was, increase effectiveness. So banking system underwent change. What did the banking system do? It tried to shift operating environment. Right, it was anticipated that banks would boost their performance. Unka performance boost ho jayega if they shift their operating environment. So for this, a number of initiatives also were started. We are told the list of initiatives. According to the examination of reforms, metrics between public sector banks, private sector banks did not differ much. On the other hand, foreign banks outperformed the Indian counterparts in terms of efficiency. So, in the passage, we are told efficiency ke liye kya changes are required, shifting operating environment and a number of initiatives. And research shows that in terms of efficiency, foreign banks outperformed Indian banks. So, by implication, we can say India needs to improve efficiency in its banks. Okay. Let's go through the passage. So let's go to the questions. Let's go to option A. Banking sector reforms in India were introduced to give more employment opportunities. We are told to increase effectiveness, banking system underwent change. So not for employment opportunities. Usse kuch lena dena nahi tha, not mentioned in the passage. So A is incorrect. B, the downtrodden masses were excluded from the banking sector before the reforms. Nowhere stated that they were excluded. There's no mention of exclusion. In fact, it would be probably towards inclusion, but it's not discussed. Exclusion, inclusion, not discussed. B, invalid. D is also incorrect. Giving a better return to central government. How much money the central government is making, not discussed in the passage. If we don't have any evidence, we can't infer. Let's see if we can infer C. There is a discernible difference. There's a noticeable difference. That is what discernible difference means. There's a noticeable difference in the efficiency parameters of Indian and foreign banks after the reforms. So if you notice, we are told Bank of India started number of initiatives. उन्होंने reforms शुरू कर दिए, and we are told the list of reforms. But according to the examination of reforms, when the reforms were examined, efficiency of Indian banks was lesser than foreign banks. Indian public sector banks, private sector banks, their efficiency was similar, but foreign banks had higher efficiency. So there is a noticeable difference in the efficiency of Indian and foreign banks after the reforms. This is directly stated in the passage, and then it has been turned into this inference. C is the correct choice for question 7. Alright. Let's look at question 8. The paragraph best supports the statement that. So this means these statements are probably, if it's right, these statements are supported by the paragraph. Like an inference question, like an implication question, the paragraph best supports means we are essentially taking a fact in the passage and then rewording it here. Okay. Let's look at the passage. Some experts even believe that the low carb, low fat debate diverts us from more important issues. So, pehle to let's realize that this debate diverts us from more important issues. More important issues like our culture's reliance on processed food. So, the author is saying this low carb, low fat debate is a distraction. We are focusing on the wrong thing. We should instead be focusing on our reliance on processed food. This debate is so pervasive that one would think there are only two options. The author is again talking about this debate being problematic. एक तो इसका पहला problem ये है, it distracts us from the main problem. The problem that is we consume too much processed food. And the other negative outcome of this debate is people think there are only two options. एक तो low carb या low fat for losing weight. ठीक है. Now the paragraph supports which statement? Let's look at A. Experts state that not all fats are equal. Here there is no discussion of whether one fat is equal or any type of diet. We are just discussing the negative impact of some debate, right? So A invalid ho gaya. Let's look at D. Processed foods can lead to many adverse health problems. We are only told the problem is our culture's reliance on processed foods. What did I tell you? We are looking for the paragraph best supports, right? Here also we are looking for inference. So we need some fact to say option D. We need some fact stated in the passage for us to say adverse health problems including heart disease, cancer. इससे related कुछ नहीं होगा तो it's a invalid statement. C. Low carbohydrate diet lead to significant and sustained weight loss. Nowhere discuss that one type of diet is very good for sustained weight loss. So B is the correct choice. B is discussing important health concerns get overlooked. We are distracted, it diverts us when we focus exclusively on low fat versus low carb question. So this debate is distracting to us. This debate diverts us. Just these words, this debate diverts us, has been written as option B. Alright, option B is the correct choice. Let's look at the next one. Passage 8, question number 9. On the basis of the above passage, following assumptions have been made. Again, we are looking for a valid or underlying assumption. Let's go through the passage once. All medical professionals agree that we need to concentrate on reducing prevalence of prediabetes. So the author so far is saying we need to concentrate on reducing prediabetes and improving its management. So how to do this? First is kitchen revival, diverse diet. So how to reduce prevalence of diabetes? Follow a diverse diet. Jisme rice does not form centerpiece, but follow a diverse diet. Second, more difficult challenge is the attitudinal shift. So to reduce prevalence of diabetes, follow a good diet, diverse diet, and you change your attitude. But change your attitude towards what? In many rural and urban areas in India, physical work is linked to class hierarchy. So a family's ability to hire more aid, matlab if you hire help to maintain your house, this means you will do less exercise, right? So this more difficult challenge is the attitudinal shift. It's talking about attitude towards physical work. So the author is saying that if you want to reduce pre-diabetes ka prevalence, you need to do two things. One is follow this diverse diet, jo bhi rice mat khao, and second is do physical work. Correct? This is the passage. Let's go through the options. One, regular movement and physical work may help prevent pre-diabetes. So we are told physical work, we are told family's ability to hire more and maintain more functioning motions decreases. So their tendency to function decreases. So their regular movement decreases if they have money. That means the author was saying we should continue to move regularly, we should do physical work, and this will help prevent pre-diabetes. So one is valid. Two, it is important to manage pre-diabetes in people to prevent it from turning into something more serious. So 2 is also valid because the author is saying everyone, all medical professionals agree we need to concentrate on reducing pre-diabetes. So this is told and improve its management. So those who are pre-diabetic, unka management should improve, and those who aren't pre-diabetic should be stopped from becoming pre-diabetic. So iska कहना ये है और implication ये है, it is important. If you don't do this, it could become more serious. We need to address it now. So 2 is also a valid assumption. One of the ways in which I can show you that 2 is a valid assumption is if I said it is not important, right? If I say it is not important to manage pre-diabetes, then agree that we need to concentrate. So this we need not concentrate ho jata, yeah, right? So this would become we need not concentrate if I add the word not here. So what I told you, the definition of assumption was if I negate a valid assumption, the passage will get negated. If a valid assumption is removed, the passage will stop making sense. Think of it like that. If a valid assumption is removed, the passage will stop making sense. So both assumptions here are valid. C is the correct choice for question number 9. Actually, passage, this is the passage. Let's look at the next one. Okay. Alright, let's look at this question. Consider the following statements about the passage given above. So we don't know, looks like a fact based question ki simple fact they'll ask, we'll check. British ambassador named Lord Macartney visited the court of Chinese emperor with the intention of establishing an embassy. उसको embassy establish करनी थी. He brought a number of presents from his country which was beginning to industrialize. He was swatted away by the emperor, whose nation at the time represented approximately a third of the world's GDP. So we are told that the Chinese emperor rejected this offer for help. He penned to King George, "Your sincere humility and obedience can clearly be seen, but we have not the slightest need of your country's manufacture." तो उसने reject कर दिया, and we are told the attempts at reform in China in the 1830s were met with failure, humiliation, and ultimately Maoism as the British returned with gunboats to force commerce open. Now, okay, a few things about the passage. एक तो passage narrative है, इसमें कुछ story describe हो रही है, ठीक है. We are asked which of the following statements of the given passage are correct, ठीक है, factual way में. Now in this question, most students have had a problem with the last sentence, ठीक है, and I'll tell you why, but first we'll figure out statement 1. The Chinese were a superpower in the 18th century, a position they have reclaimed. ये तो कहीं पे भी stated नहीं है कि 18th century में they were a superpower. What is the definition of a superpower according to 18th century? Unknown to us. Like for example, let's say currently we can say nuclear, having a nuclear arsenal or nuclear power, but we don't know a definition of 18th century superpower. Is not discussed in the passage, so invalid, right? Now let's look at 2. After the British insurgents, China was forced to enter Maoism by the British. तो पहले तो last sentence we'll reread because a lot of students have gone with B. ठीक है. Let's look at the attempts at reform in China in the 1830s were met with failure. So China's attempts at reforms were met with failure, humiliation, and Maoism, right? As the British returned with gunboats to force commerce open. So let's reread this sentence as the attempts at reform in China in the 1830s were met with A, B, and C. Okay, it doesn't, the reason why I'm replacing it with variables, I want to simplify it. So these attempts were met with A, B, and C as the British returned with gunboats to force commerce open. So there is no discussion of here, which is the British caused this to happen, C to happen, or the British caused B to happen, or the British caused A to happen. For example, what I'm trying to say is, if the second statement was written, after the British insurgents, China was forced to humiliation by the British, it would also be incorrect. Because this A, B, and C is reflecting what China went through. A, B, and C is reflecting what China went through during their reforms. Right? This is not caused by anyone else. So China was forced by the British is incorrect. Right? Forced to enter, was forced to enter Maoism only is incorrect. Right? By the British is even more incorrect. So D is incorrect. D is the correct choice for this question. Okay. So the next passage is a long passage. Now longer passages का एक ये होता है कि if you have time, provided if you have time, in a long passage, our accuracy for questions increases. Thoda sa, right? Because we go through the passage multiple times. So here, now I know many students didn't actually solve this question. And that's because if you notice, the passage is a little difficult to read. Okay? So I'll simplify the passage for those of you who solved it, and let's see if you got the question right. So we are told what a metaphor is. It's a poetic device. Okay, that deals with comparison. It compares similar quantities of two dissimilar objects. So example is given. Love is a rose. Now these are two dissimilar objects, but they are compared. So we are told why. Although this does not sound like a particularly rich image, metaphors can communicate so much about a particular image that poets use them more than any other type of figurative language. So here, metaphors communicate a lot. The reason for this is that poets compose their poetry with what they are experiencing emotionally. So अब तक in short, metaphor का definition चल रहा है. Example is also given. Love is a rose. ठीक है. Now what all does a metaphor achieve? एक तो ये पोएट के इमोशंस एक्सप्रेस करेगा ठीक से, ठीक है, वो the metaphor will be able to communicate things properly, completely. So therefore we can tell, since our perception and the poet's perception of love may be different, therefore the poet's job is to enable us to experience it. So the use of this poetic device or metaphor is so that we experience it, to feel the same way. We should be able to nod in agreement and say, yes, that is, I understand. Okay. Now, second paragraph, let's analyze this remarkably unsophisticated metaphor concerning love and rose. So the author is now analyzing this example, right? And the analysis of that example is being made to explain to us what this love is a rose metaphor is. And we are told that rose is very good to touch and feel and smell, but it has thorns, so it's also problematic. So the entire passage is trying to tell us what a metaphor is through the point of view of this love is a rose example. Let's look at the next page. However, there is another dimension added to comparison of rose. So the second paragraph is talking about the positive aspects of a rose. It's good to touch, smell, etc. And the third paragraph is talking about negative aspects, which is it has a thorn, and that's why it's specifically used. So the last sentence, what is the point? Just this, it took almost 14 sentences to clarify what a simple metaphor communicates. Right? So a metaphor communicates a lot, that is told to us, and it communicates the whole thing. That is the artistry and the joy of a simple metaphor. So, okay, there is some artistry and joy in it involved. Okay. So, passage we have understood. Passage is through the point of view of an example trying to tell us what a metaphor is. Now, let's look at the next question that is associated with the passage. The main idea of this passage. Always remember, anything that we read in the exam, anything, whether it be a passage like this, whether it be a smaller passage like this, any verbal passage that you read in the exam always has a main point. It has one main point. So here the main point is metaphor is a great poetic device. First sentence only said metaphor is a poetic device. Last sentence said one simple metaphor can convey what 14 lines can convey. So metaphor is a great poetic device is fine, but we can't select it. We can't select any option in the exam. We have to eliminate our way to that option. So always eliminate A, poetic devices are necessary for poets. This is not stated in the passage. They are used by poets, but they are necessary. मतलब उसके बिना poetry आप लिख ही नहीं पाओगे. ऐसे नहीं कहा है. Poetry must never cater to senses. Again, not stated in the passage. C, always use words that create one specific image. So this is not true. The main idea of the passage is always use words that create one specific image, nowhere related. Main point of the passage is what is a metaphor and how important it is. Only D has communicated this. Let's look at the next question. It can be inferred that a metaphor is. So a metaphor is, here again let's go through elimination. D, a type of flower. ये तो example था, so it's not a type of flower. Not precise enough. In fact, we are told it's very precise. In a small metaphor, we can include what 14 sentences were trying to say. So not precise enough, incorrect. The only poetic device. मतलब इसके अलावा और कोई poetic device है ही नहीं. So obviously incorrect. And A is the correct choice. A type of figurative language. If you notice, here the author calls it a figurative language. A type of figurative language. So this has been stated in the passage that a metaphor is a type of figurative language. Okay. Let's look at the next question. It can be inferred that the true meaning of love is love is a rose metaphor. इसका क्या मतलब है? Love is a rose metaphor का सही मतलब क्या है? So let's look at A. It's true joy. We know second paragraph is talking about the importance of, not the importance actually, why a rose is good, why we can smell it, it smells good, etc. But the second paragraph tells us the negative aspects of the rose. So true joy is just talking about the second paragraph. We need second and third paragraph. If you want to explain what love is a rose metaphor in its entirety, we need both second and third paragraph. So love comes only once in a lifetime. Ye to completely beyond scope. Love is never permanent. Again, never extreme, and permanency of it not discussed in the passage. D is the correct choice. Love is a combination of good and bad experience. It's a mixed experience, right? There are thorns and it's pleasurable. So it's mixed. According to the passage, the poet's intention is to do which of the following? Release anger, announce heartache, reward the senses. Release anger to invalid hai, not about one emotion. In fact, anger is not discussed. To announce heartache also is not the poet's intention. The poet's intention was to give us an idea that love is a combination of good and bad experiences. It wasn't to say heartache. So invalid. D, to reward the senses. It's not purely from a senses point of view. It's also conceptual point of view. The author is not purely talking, although senses are mentioned, but the love metaphor thing is not purely from a senses point of view. It's from the entirety of the experience. So let's look at option C, to enable you. The poet's intention is to enable you to experience the poet's point of view. We are told that if our point of view and the poet's point of view is different, the poet will give us a metaphor so that we can understand. So C is saying to enable you to experience the poet's point of view. C is the right choice, directly stated in the passage. Alright. Now a small question again. And here, which of the following statements is correct about Antarctic ice fish? Correct about Antarctic ice fish matlab ye mostly factual hai. Isme any kind of option can be created, but same is factual. Let's go through the passage. Antifreeze proteins, AFPs, let Antarctic ice fish live in seas as cold as -2 degrees by lowering the freezing point of their bodily fluids and by binding to ice crystals to prevent them from spreading. So we are told two ways in which these AFPs can allow fish to live as cold as -2 degrees at this temperature. So one is wo freezing point of their body fluids will lower and they'll bind to ice crystals to prevent them from spreading. So the ice won't spread within their bodies. Rat hearts. Now the author, after telling us about AFPs and what these AFPs do for ice fish, we are now being told what happens to rat hearts. Rat hearts have been kept alive for up to 24 hours at a few degrees below zero using fluids containing ice fish AFPs. So using these AFPs, rat hearts also have been kept at low temperature. ठीक है, passage fairly easy. Let's go through the options. Now let's look at, a lot of students in this case have gone either A, C, or I mean D is the right choice, but A or C also a lot of students have selected. So let's look at first option. We'll eliminate option B. They cannot survive in warm temperatures. Yeah, this is not discussed whether they can or they cannot survive in warm temperatures. Nothing related to warm temperatures can be said with certainty, right? So B is incorrect. Let's look at A. Their bodily fluids cannot freeze because of AFPs. So I can't say that their bodily fluids cannot freeze because I'm specifically told lowering the freezing point. Matlab they can freeze at a lower temperature. Cannot freeze, invalid. C. AFPs found in catfish are the solution to preserving organs. Now because this rat hearts has been given and AFPs have been discussed in news, I guess some students went with solution to preserving organs. But this is nowhere stated in the passage that what use it will have. That rat hearts will stay for longer is stated. But AFPs found in catfish not mentioned, are the solution to preserving organs, meaning this is a good idea, or rather than good, this is a practically feasible, something that you can implement, a practically feasible idea. This has not been stated in the passage, something that you can implement, you can't say, and it's about catfish. So D is the only clear choice. Their AFPs, which is the AFPs of Antarctic ice fish, can be transplanted to organs of other species. So if you notice, these AFPs were put into rat hearts. They were transplanted into rat hearts, right? So their AFPs can be transplanted into organs of other species. Organs of other species is where we get rat hearts, right? So D is the correct choice for question number 15. All right. Let's look at the next one. So again, we have a longer passage, but here I've marked it for us. It's not as easy as the initial passage to read also. We'll go through it. So neurotransmitters transmit. We are told what neurotransmitters do. They transmit stuff. But there is still much that scientists don't understand about how this transmission happens in the brain. So then the author tells us two processes. One is serotonin seems to be crucial for, and if you notice, When a long passage appears, I'm not trying to remember information. I'm just trying to capture what is happening in each paragraph more or less without the facts. Because the questions and their options will push me in the direction of the passage and I'll have to reread the facts anyways. So initial reading, I'm not trying to record facts. I'm trying to see what the author is telling me. पहले तो author is saying neurotransmitters के बारे में scientists don't understand much. Then what serotonin is good for? It's good for controlling sleep, mood, hunger, etc. And what norepinephrine is good for? It's good for some other things. So norepinephrine can act as a hormone or a neurotransmitter only when awake are both released in large amounts. So only when a person is awake will both be released, norepinephrine and serotonin. Now at the onset of sleep, when sleep begins, the neurons that release these neurotransmitters become less active. We are told that when we are awake, both are released in large amounts. So when we are sleeping, both reduce. Essentially, the second paragraph is telling us that when we are sleeping, both reduce. Let's look at the last few sentences. Some hypothesis held that absence of norepinephrine was required to enable the brain to remain asleep. So this norepinephrine ke liye another use is told to us here. When it's increased, we'll be alert and mental attention will increase. When it's decreased, we'll be able to sleep. Correct? Then the second part of the last sentence, absence of serotonin was necessary to allow dreaming to occur. Matlab, serotonin, agar aap badhaoge, if you increase serotonin, it will help you with mood, hunger and sleep. Right? But if you reduce it, absence of serotonin, it will allow you to dream. तो आपका dreaming बढ़ जाएगा. Basically, ये दोनों हटने से we'll be able to sleep more, dream more, in short. Alright. Let's look at question 16. Okay. According to the passage, serotonin plays a role in which of the following processes? So, you read that serotonin does this, norepinephrine does this. For this question to be right, you actually have to go back to the passage and reread those parts. You can't solve this from memory. And the other thing that you need to remember is that in options like this, again, you have to be careful. For example, sleep and serotonin plays a major role in sleep and appetite is mentioned. But a lot of students have gone for other options where there are appetite is mentioned or mood is mentioned. This is right, these are serotonin. But alertness and mental focus is norepinephrine. This is norepinephrine. This is norepinephrine. And this is norepinephrine. So all of them are incorrect except sleep and appetite. Both of them are managed using serotonin. Right? So only A is the correct choice. You'll have to solve these questions carefully. It looks simple. Many times we make a mistake because it looks simple. 17. The passage implies which of the following about the fourth stage of sleep? Alright. Here, some stages of sleep were discussed, and if you notice, I haven't marked them. The reason is this was while reading only, this is going to be a little complicated for us to read. So that doesn't mean we have to skip it. We'll still read through it while reading, but we don't have to think of it too much. If a question prompts us in that direction, we'll go and analyze it carefully. We are told the brain to enter 3 non-rapid eye movement stages of sleep. These neurotransmitters become less active. So we are told there are 3 non-rapid, non-REM stages of sleep. The non-REM stages are not associated with normal dreaming and etc. Then we are told when the brain is ready, are most common during stage 3. When the brain is ready to enter the 4th stage, what happens during the 4th stage? We are told that here there's a lot of dreaming going on in the 4th stage. In the 4th stage, it's associated with dreaming. And the levels of 2 neurotransmitters drop virtually to 0. So 4th stage mein dreaming increases and both those neurotransmitters, serotonin and norepinephrine, drop. ठीक है? Now let's look at passage question. This question which passage implies which of the following about the 4th stage of sleep. So 4th stage of sleep, I can say that our dreaming increases and serotonin falls, right? Now let's say one enters the 4th stage of sleep only after passing through the first 3 stages. A lot of students went for this, but nowhere in the passage is it discussed that in a linear fashion it happens. that you go from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3 then to stage 4. The problem with this is only after passing through, actually stages likha hai, so we intuitively feel stages hai to 1, 2, 3, 4 hona chahiye. But only after means I can't go from 1 to 4, right? Directly. I need to go to step 2. Step 2 is compulsory. Step 3 is compulsory. This I can't say from the passage. And this is the reason why many people went with A. I know what stage 4 is. I know that stage 4 will come after stage 3, but I can't say that I have to go through each stage. So A is incorrect. B, parasomnias such as sleepwalking and confusional arousals don't occur during the 4th stage. So this is, these don't occur during the 4th stage is not given to us. These occur predominantly in the other stages, that is told to us. But these never occur or they cannot occur in this stage is not said to us. So B is invalid. Let's look at D. Certain neurotransmitter levels fluctuate rapidly during the 4th stage. This fluctuate rapidly is totally beyond scope. So correct choice is C. Normal dreaming occurs more frequently during the 4th stage of sleep than the first 3. So normal dreaming is told to us whatever it is, but we know dreaming frequently occurs in the 4th stage of sleep, right? So we can say normal dreaming frequently occurs in 4th stage of sleep. All right. So C is the correct choice for this question. All right. Let's look at the next one. So for 16 we are going with A. For this 17 we are going with C. Let's look at the next one. Okay. Now the main idea of the passage. We are looking for the main idea of the passage. Whether you can accomplish a specific goal or meet a specific deadline depends on how much time you need to get the job done. So we are told here whether you can accomplish a specific goal is based on how much time. Now, if you want to achieve whatever goal you have set out to, how do you do that? The best approach, the author is giving us a best approach. Best approach is to divide the project into smaller pieces. Different goals will have to be divided in different ways, but one seemingly unrealistic goal can be accomplished by making several small pieces. So, best way to approach our goals is told to us by the author. In short, the main idea of the author is the best approach to accomplish a specific goal. The best approach to accomplish a specific goal is to divide the project into several smaller parts. Alright, let's look at A. The main idea is jobs often remain only partially completed because of lack of time. This is not a frequent thing. Often remain only partially completed. This is not stated in the passage, right? We aren't told that the jobs remain only partially completed because of lack of time. So, ये invalid हो गया. Let's look at B. The best way to complete projects is to make sure your goals are achievable. ये select achievable goals. ऐसे passage में कहीं पे भी बोला नहीं है. तो B is invalid. Make sure your goals are achievable. Invalid. Let's look at D. The best approach to a demanding job is to delegate responsibility. Is to give responsibility to others. Again, not stated in the passage. We are told very specifically make smaller parts. No other option is talking about making smaller parts. C has to be the correct choice. Right? For question 18, C is the correct choice. Alright. Let's look at the next one. A few firms, we are told in this passage that a few firms profit from the intellectual property rights and technology connected to GM foods. Since businesses may now claim a patent on the whole species. तो इसमें क्या लिखा है कि few firms can profit because of IPR. Now, since you can patent a whole species, like a brinjal can belong to my company, my species, right? So, may now claim a patent on whole species. Because of this, it has led to seed sovereignty, meaning I have control over GM brinjal, for example. So, once any of these types are made public, India will see severe IPR unrest. Like if you make this public thing, India will see severe IPR unrest because this would be opposite to the efforts made by our ancestors, where they used to co-evolve a species. Along with human civilization, a species is co-evolving at its natural rate during millions of years of evolution. So in short, the problem is about a few firms profiting and owning. Seed sovereignty is the problem, owning that patent or owning that species. Alright, let's go through the options. Based on the passage, which of the following are implied? Control over genetic material by a select few can lead to social unrest. So, a few firms profit from IPR. So, we can say control over, so this is few firms profiting or owning, own it, seed sovereignty. Control over genetic material by a select few can lead to social unrest. We are told this will lead to India having unrest. So this is a valid implication. 2, we need to conduct independent studies to verify efficiency of GM. So need to conduct independent studies, efficiency of GM, neither has been discussed, 2 is invalid. And 3, now 3 also, a lot of students have actually gone for option A, which is 1 and 3 only, but this is incorrect and I'll tell you why. The technologies which can edit one gene within a genome, okay, are owned by a few corporations. Now I don't know if the technologies are owned only by a few. Here we are told a few firms profit from IPR and technology connected to GM foods. So this means, let's say companies, let's say few firms, meaning A, B and C profit from the intellectual property rights and technology connected to GM foods. But this does not mean that the technology is owned only by A, B and C. This could mean that the technology is owned by X, Y and Z also, right? What if these are governments? X, Y and Z are governments. They could very well own that technology. So I can't say the technology is owned by a few. The problem is that the profits are for a select few who own the seed. It's not, the passage is not discussing technological sovereignty. Tech sovereignty is not discussed. Seed sovereignty is discussed. So for that reason, 3 is also invalid, right? So for that reason, both 2 and 3 are invalid. Both 2 and 3 are invalid. C is the correct choice, which is 1 only. Alright. So this technology is owned. This landed a lot of people in trouble, but this is actually not stated in the passage. Like I just showed you, companies XYZ could own the technology, or governments XYZ could own the technology without actually applying it. We don't know how many people are applying and owning patents based on it. Alright. Okay. So another slightly long passage, पर ये passage में we can get all the questions associated with the right. We can't afford to get any wrong. Relatively easy long passage. And like I said, थोड़ा भी long passage होगा तो उसमें accuracy बढ़ेगी if we have time. If we have that little extra time. So let's look at the questions. Cycle of floods followed by drought that has lasted for a large portion of the 20th century caused great misery. So we are told floods and drought caused great misery near the Nile river. Egyptian government decided कि ये misery कैसे end करे? How do we stop this? Make a sizable dam. By making a sizable dam, you'll avoid floods, you'll give electric power also. So we are told this Aswan Dam supplied almost half of Egypt's overall electricity output. This was a great achievement. Okay. Now, these advantages were however offset. So the first paragraph was told to us about telling us about this good innovation. Aswan Dam was good. Now, second paragraph is telling us offset by negative long-term effects. For example, long-term effects like silt deposition में कुछ problem हो गया. Okay, so list of long-term problems is told to us and deleterious effects is told to us. Now, the last sentence says, so first we are talking about this problem, floods and drought. Problem was solved by Aswan Dam. Second paragraph is talking about the problems created by Aswan Dam. The last sentence is saying that the problems don't, I'll read the actual sentence and simplify it for all students and make sure you're also following the same process of simplification. Right, and that process is here, we can actually cancel out or replace a particular word or phrase with a variable. It is difficult to draw definite conclusions about a project with such profound and varied results, but it would be untenable to assert that the Egyptian government should never have built the Aswan Dam. So firstly, learn to break the sentence down into two parts. Let's look at the first part of the sentence. Difficult to draw definite conclusions. ठीक है? Then second part of the sentence, but it would be untenable to assert that Egyptian government should never have built the Aswan Dam. So it would be unsomething to assert that Egyptian government should never have built. So Egyptian government should never have built is a wrong idea. So all I can tell from the last sentence, if I didn't understand the word untenable, is that the Egyptian government should never have built the dam. ऐसे नहीं बोल सकते. There are some advantages, there are some disadvantages. All right. Let's look at the next question here associated with this. So the passage implies which of the following are effects of the Aswan Dam? इसके क्या effects है? So we know positive effects are given, negative effects are given. We'll have to skim through the passage and figure out which of these are correct, incorrect. Most students got this question right, so we'll go through it. Crops need silt to flourish. This is not discussed in the passage whether crops need silt or not to flourish. A is invalid. B, farmers are happy that the dam was built, despite the need to purchase fertilizer because of the river no longer floods. But farmers are happy, farmers are glad. Nowhere stated that because of the Aswan Dam, farmers are glad. Even though, despite means even though there is need to purchase fertilizer. If farmers need to purchase fertilizer, one thing is that they won't obviously automatically be happy. So B is incorrect. D, Egypt now competes successfully on economic level with Western nations. Obviously D is completely incorrect. Only C remains. The land around the river is not as naturally fertile as it was before the dam was built. This is what the second paragraph is talking about. That there is a lot of loss of fertility of the land because of the dam. So C is the correct choice for this question. Let's look at the next one. What is the significance of the author's statement that the dam generated half of the Egypt's output of the electricity by the 1970s? So pehle to na, always remember your accuracy in the exam matters based on, first is, multiple things matter, but if we are to be reductive, knowing why an option is incorrect is important. Having clarity about the passage is important. But we need to know what a question is asking us. If we don't have clarity about the question also, our inaccuracies are quite high. Significance of the author's statement that the dam generated half of output of electricity. So look at this question as, why did the author tell us that the dam generated half of Egypt's output? So why did the author tell us that the dam generated half of Egypt's output? अब passage में author ने क्या कहा? पहले एक problem बताया. Problem was there was a lot of flooding in some region of Egypt. ये problem को solve करने के लिए dam बनाया, Aswan Dam. Aswan Dam has some positives and some negative. Negative are discussed in second paragraph. First paragraph discusses positives, right? So why did the author's statement tell us that the dam generated half of Egypt's output? Because the author wanted to tell us Aswan Dam is positive, it is important, or it has a positive influence, right? First half of the paragraph tells us that Aswan Dam was positive. Let's look at A. It proves that Egypt no longer needed to rely on other sources of electricity. ये कहीं पे भी prove नहीं किया कि no other sources needed. A is invalid. D. It shows that the dam fell short of initial expectations. D is also invalid. Actually, D is talking about something negative about the dam. We know that the first half of the paragraph, why did the author's statement tell us that the dam generated half of the output, was given to say something positive about the dam. So D invalid ho gaya. C, it argues that the positive energy output is more important. Positive energy output is more important than any negative effects. So this more important than any negative effect is absolutely invalid. We are left with B. This question was a little confusing because of the question stem, but the options are actually quite easy for us to eliminate. It demonstrates the magnitude of the positive effects created by the dam. So it is trying to tell us that the dam was positive. If we are to look at the question, what is the significance of the author's statement? Because I feel that the question will be asked again, I'm trying to explain that question. asked again as in the exam I'm saying. Here, just look at why this statement was given. Let's look at this last sentence. Most Egyptian communities had electricity. Dam supplied almost half of Egypt's overall electricity output. So the author has given this to signify that it's important for us. Remember to simplify question stems, otherwise it's challenging for us to answer simple questions. Alright, most valid conclusion मतलब inference question ही है वो, passage को लेके we have to take some fact in the passage and we need to make a valid conclusion from it. Fact, opinion, anything stated in the passage. The government is generating plethora of gender disaggregated data through either implementation, related statistics or surveys and using them to reform schemes. ये data using them is referring to using data. Plural of data तो using them बोल रहे हो. Government is generating a plethora of gender data. ये gender disaggregated data अगर पता नहीं है तो ठीक है. A lot of gender data the government is getting from its implementation, from its statistics, from its surveys, and it's using that gender data to reform schemes. ठीक है? And because of this using gender data to reform schemes, because of this, there is a virtuous cycle. So it's good, right? It is now the onus of individuals and groups in academics, etc., to further mainstream women's rights. So the author is saying, in short, government did something positive by using data for women, right? Now private also should aspire to do the same, in short, right? Government has done this, so private should also aspire to do the same. How do we reform women's lives and their rights in society? All right. So which of the following is the most valid conclusion? Let's start with D. Gender mainstreaming must seamlessly pervade every sphere of state policy. So if I say gender mainstreaming must seamlessly pervade some state policies, fine. Every sphere of state policy, invalid. We can't say that it's in every sphere. From the passage, we can't say every sphere, right? So D is incorrect. Let's look at C. Use of data fortifies women's access to economic resources, thus elevating their social status. We'll actually put C aside. We'll compare A and C. A lot of students have gone with C as well. Let's look at B. The statistical architecture of the nation as we knew it has been rebuilt. So we can't, this may be factually true, but in the passage this has not been discussed that the statistical architecture has been rebuilt. ये discussion passage में नहीं हुआ है. So B is incorrect. Let's look at A. Quantification is a step towards resolution and rectification of women's rights challenges. So actually first is, let's look at the option A as just these words. Quantification is, let's read this as quantification can rectify. Quantification can rectify women's rights challenges. अब government ने क्या किया? Gender data लिया. So they quantified it. They quantified the data, and this quantification they used it to reform schemes. So quantification can rectify women's rights challenges. This is stated in the passage, right? C में problem ये है, use of data fortifies women's access to economic resources, thus elevating their social status. We can't specifically say that use of data improves access to only economic resources. If you notice, the passage is saying that we should improve this and further mainstream women's right in public policy for Janhit, not specifically related to just economic resources, not specifically just related to social status, right? So C is actually invalid. This specificity, use of data fortifies access to economics, this is specific, not stated in the passage. The only specific thing that is stated in the passage is if you measure women's how they get schemes, and if you survey women, if you measure and quantify their demands, you can actually rectify women's rights. So that is stated in option A. A is the correct choice. All right. Let's look at this question here. Again, a small passage we have. The paragraph best supports the statement. Best supports the statement. So we essentially have to read the paragraph, find out which of them is well supported. Everyone is sensitive to extreme weather conditions, but with age, the body may become less able, right? So I'm told that actually with age, the body may become less able to deal with extreme weather conditions, whether very hot or very cold. Now the author says some older people might develop hypothermia. So some older people might develop hypothermia when exposed to cold weather. Hypothermia को define किया है is a drop in the internal body temperature which can be problematic, right? Which can lead to death. So best supports which statement? Let's look at A. Cold weather is more dangerous for old people than warm weather. See, hot or cold is mentioned here. ठीक है, but let's say hot versus cold. So which affects which group of people how is not discussed from the point of view of hot weather. Cold weather affects old people more. This is stated, right? Some older people might get hypothermia, right? So cold is more dangerous for older people than warm, not discussed. Let's look at B. Hypothermia is a condition that only affects older people. This no one has selected, very few. So B is incorrect. Let's look at C. Older people who live in warm climates are healthier than older people who live in cold climates. So those who live in warm climates are healthier. This is warm climates are healthier, not discussed, not implied. We are looking for the paragraph supporting this information. A, B and C has not been supported by the paragraph. Only D is supported. An older person is more susceptible to hypothermia than a younger person. How do I know this for sure? Some older people might develop hypothermia, and we are told that this tendency to develop anything, for now we are saying developing hypothermia, but this tendency to develop something negative based on temperature is more prominent with age. Right, so this is more prominent with age. So I'm told an older person is more susceptible to develop negative things based on temperature as compared to a young person. Right, so hypothermia can be added here because it's stated clearly. D is the correct choice for this question. Let's look at the next one. Alright, we are looking at this gig economy question. This also was a little confusing for students. So on the basis of the above passage, following assumptions have been made. A gig economy company, पहले तो gig economy को define कर रहा है. A gig economy company is the fundamental idea of the company is to have a huge pool of employees available. So this is a big pool of employees. This has maybe 100, 400 employees, lot of employees, just a big pool of employees. The shifting demand for service. So demand drops, increases. This shifting demand is matched by this abundant pool of employees. So जो भी इतने extra employees है, अगर demand बढ़ गया तो उनको काम पे लगा दो, right? As a result of the constant growth in the supply of labor, there is more competition. Because of this tendency, there is more competition and a greater readiness to accept low pay. Since there is competition, these people will accept lower pay. Right? They'll accept lower pay. The platforms may then offer services at low cost. So because the pay is less, the platforms will offer the service at a much lower cost. And this will help them outbid their rivals and establish their own monopoly in the market. So in short, a gig economy company has lot of employees, abundant supply of labor. This labor makes them competitive, makes them spend less. They are spending less on the salary of their employees. And then they offer services at low cost. By offering services at low cost, they can establish monopoly in the market. a lot of people probably got irritated with the gig economy company and then, or rather found the term difficult more than irritated, found the term difficult and then had problem solving. So I explained it carefully. Let's look at the options. Which of them is a valid assumption? Just a moment. And like I said, अगर valid assumption होगा उसको हम हटा देंगे तो passage का भी कोई crucial part हट जाएगा. A valid assumption is necessary for the passage to exist. Let's look at one. If the pool of employees in a gig economy company starts to drop, business can suffer. Very few students have actually marked this question correctly. So if the pool of employees starts to drop, business can suffer. A gig economy company का fundamental क्या है? Huge pool of employees. Right? So let's say A and B are both gig economy companies. A has 100 employees and B has 1000 employees or 10,000 employees. So B is in a better position. So if the pool of employees in a gig economy company starts to drop, business can suffer. B is in a better position than A, we can say that. So 1 is a valid assumption. If I said, if the pool of employees in a gig economy starts to drop, business can, let's say, can improve. This I can't state from the passage, right? This will be invalid. But if you say suffer, that's valid. Alright. 2 gig economy models, if run successfully, can allow a company to dominate the market. Second statement also, many people found it difficult. Many students have gone with D in this question actually. A gig economy, if this companies run successfully, can allow a company to dominate the market. So can allow the company to dominate the market is establish monopoly. Okay, and we are told a gig economy company can have a lot of labor. By having a lot of labor, they can drop their salaries, they can offer services at low cost, and then they can establish their own monopoly in the market. So we are clearly told a gig economy model, let's say company A, if it's run successfully, can allow company A to dominate the market, to establish monopoly in the market. So the correct choice here is C. If I said gig economy models, if run successfully, cannot allow a company to dominate the market, फिर ये सारा गलत हो जाता. There is more competition, low pay, low cost, and then monopoly. This logic from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 is given to us to say that a company can actually dominate the market using this strategy. This logic would falter if I added the word not here. So in short, a valid assumption is necessary for a passage to exist. C is the correct choice for this question. Let's look at the next one. Which of the following is the most rational logical assumption that can be made on the basis of the above passage? Let's go through the passage. Cyclone forecasting is an essential tool for mitigating disastrous impact. So we are told cyclone forecasting essential to reduce impact. We are told despite advancements, accuracy of cyclone forecasting is difficult. So even though it's important, we can't accurately forecast. And we are told reasons for this difficulty in forecasting. First is it's unpredictable. Cyclones are unpredictable. Lack of comprehensive data. So let's say lack of data. Furthermore, increasing impact of climate change. Moreover, the accuracy of forecasting is often influenced by political and economic factors that prioritize short-term interests over long-term preparedness. So, political interests and economic factors that focus on short-term interests. So, in short, author is talking about cyclone forecasting important to hai, it's important to mitigate, but the challenges which makes it hard to achieve, 1, 2, these are all challenges. It's unpredictable, data is hard to find, political economic factors get in the way, climate change is there. All of these are reasons as to why cyclone forecasting is essential yet difficult to do. Right? Let's go through the options. Let's see which of them is a valid assumption. Let's look at A, cyclone forecasting and technology and modeling have not improved significantly over time. So we are told that cyclone forecasting is essential, and we are told that however, despite advancements in technology, so you've made advancements in technology, the accuracy of forecasting remains a challenge. So it's still a challenge, right? But what does option C says? Have not improved significantly over time. So let's say earlier in 1 year, you could forecast 10 cyclones, right? Then let's say this is, we'll name it for the sake of 2001, you could forecast 10 cyclones. Let's say in 2005, you could only forecast 11 cyclones. This has not been stated in the passage. I can't say whether cyclone forecasting has not improved significantly over time. I can comfortably say cyclone forecasting is still major challenge. मेजर चैलेंज वर्ड मेजर इसलिए यूज कर रहा हूं क्योंकि 3-4 रीजंस दिए as to why it's challenging, but I can't say it has not improved significantly over time. In short, what I mean by option 1 is option 1 is focused on the rate of improvement. Improvement is discussed in the passage. I can maybe say that we still find cyclone forecasting difficult. That's valid. But if I said we still find cyclone forecasting as difficult as we did in 1900, that would be incorrect. Because as difficult is implying the rate of improvement. Rate of improvement के बारे में कुछ भी बोला नहीं है passage में. So A is actually incorrect. Right, option A for cyclone forecasting, technology and modeling have not improved significantly over time. This is invalid. Let's look at B. The changing climate makes the tracking of cyclone and its intensity a futile exercise. Okay. Now, some students have selected B, but let's say changing of climate makes the tracking of cyclone and its intensity let's replace futile with useless exercise. Because that's what futile means, useless exercise. So we can't say just because tracking cyclones is hard, it's futile, because we are told it's actually essential. It's an essential exercise. So futile exercise or useless exercise makes B invalid. Let's look at C. Political and economic factors always prioritize. These factors will always prioritize short-term interests over long-term preparedness. So always is obviously incorrect, is given as an example. Let's look at D. To improve the effectiveness of cyclone forecasting. एक तो cyclone forecasting essential है, उसमें अभी भी we have challenges, so we are talking about improving this. To improve effectiveness of cyclone forecasting, it is crucial to prioritize it over short-sighted political goals. Last sentence क्या कह रहा है? The accuracy of forecasting, this forecasting, is often influenced by political factors that prioritize short-term interests. Right? These political factors which prioritize short-term interest. Option D kya? So matlab, this means that forecasting can be improved if politics does not, just a moment. So forecasting can be improved if politics does not prioritize short-term interests, right? So let's read option D. To improve the effectiveness of cyclone forecasting. वो तो ठीक है. It is crucial to prioritize it over short-sighted political goals. So it is important to prioritize it over other political goals which are not related, short-term other goals which get in the way. So D is the correct choice, right? This is proven by the last sentence of the passage. If I said to improve the effectiveness of the cyclone forecasting, it is not crucial to prioritize it over short-sighted political goals. If I said it is not crucial, this part of the passage would stop making sense. It would become invalid. So the correct choice is option D. All right. Option D is the correct choice. All right. Let me just mark that once. And again, it is crucial to prioritize it over short-sighted political goals, comes from the last sentence of the passage. Okay, so these are all the questions that were asked in your first Anubhav test. We'll be covering all types of questions that are asked in these tests. Just a moment. All right. So we'll be covering all types of questions that are asked in the test. But the one thing that I want you to take away from the test is about the verbal part of CSAT. The one thing that I want you to take away from the test is, while reading, try and achieve clarity in the passage before you start with the options. This level of clarity is slightly different for each student. Second thing is, and this is important, question stem, you need to understand what is being asked. Right? And if you don't understand what is being asked, make sure that you simplify it enough for yourself. And the other thing which will impact accuracy is you should have a specific reason, a specific word you can point to, or a specific phrase you can point to eliminate options. If you have specific reasons to eliminate options, then your evaluative process improves and you'll be better at these questions. Keep this thing in mind for your exam, and that's it for today. Thank you, everyone.